A house can look completely normal and still be impossible to sell. Not run down, not ugly, normal. I'm Sarah. I spent 20 years in title and escrow, at the table where these deals actually close, and I watched the same 5 houses come back again and again. Nobody could finance them, nobody could insure them, so in the end, nobody could buy them. That's what worthless means here. Not that the house is worth nothing. It means a lender won't lend and an insurer won't cover. And the second that's true, your buyers shrink down to people paying cash. And cash buyers? They'll name their own price. You can check all 5 yourself. Start with the first one. Number 1 is a gray metal box in the garage that most people have never opened. Federal Pacific Stab-Lok. If those words are on the panel door, slow down, because that panel has a long documented history of breakers that don't trip when they're supposed to. A breaker's got one job. When a circuit pulls more current than it should, it cuts the power. These have been found failing to do that, and the failure happens inside the wall where you can't see it. Zinsco panels carry a similar reputation. Same era, same argument. Here's what most buyers miss. This isn't really a safety story. It's a money story. Plenty of insurance carriers won't write a policy on a house with one of these panels. Others will write it only if you replace the panel first. And that's where it turns expensive, because no policy means no mortgage. Your lender requires coverage before they'll fund anything. So a panel that costs a couple $1,000s to swap quietly decides whether anybody can get a loan on a $300,000 house. I watched that exact thing kill a deal 11 days before closing. The buyer had the money. The bank was ready. The agent ran the address, saw the panel, and declined to write it. That house went back on the market and sat there. And here's the part that follows you. If you buy the place anyway, you've bought the problem too. Every buyer you ever hand it to walks into that same declined policy. And by then, you're the one paying for the panel on somebody else's timeline in the middle of your own move. These went into homes for decades. If the place was built or rewired between the 1950s and the early 80s, this is worth 30 seconds of your time. So here's what to do. Walk out to the panel, open the door, don't touch anything inside it, and read the brand name printed on the inside of that door. Photograph it with your phone, then send that photo to an insurance agent and ask one question. Will you write a policy on this house? Ask while your inspection period is still open, not after. Number 2 is a pipe. Between roughly 1978 and 1995, builders ran millions of American homes with polybutylene supply lines. It's usually gray, sometimes blue, sometimes black. Flexible plastic, about as thick as your thumb, with a code stamped along the side. It was cheap, and it went in fast, and it fails. Not dramatically, not at first. The fittings let go, usually inside a wall or under a slab, somewhere nobody looks for weeks. Now the same money problem shows up. Carriers know exactly what this pipe is. Many won't write on it at all. Some will write the policy and then exclude water damage, which is a bit like insuring a car and excluding the crash. Others will cover the house only after the whole system gets replaced. A full repeat runs into real money. Several $1,000s on a small house, well past 10 on a big one. That number's going into your negotiation, but only if you find the pipe in time. Here's the part that catches people. A seller who repiped the house has receipts, and they'll hand them over happily, because it's a selling point. A seller who didn't will tell you the plumbing has never given them a bit of trouble. Those aren't the same sentence. Poly fails on a schedule nobody controls, and never having failed yet isn't a warranty. So go look. You don't need a plumber for the first pass. Open the cabinet under the kitchen sink and look at the shutoff valves. Go to the water heater and look at what feeds it. Find the main shutoff where the water comes into the house. Gray plastic with a code stamped down the side, that's your answer. Then get a plumber's quote in writing before you agree on a price. That quote's your leverage. Number 3 is the one almost nobody knows about. And if you forget everything else today, keep this one. There's a report called CLUE. It stands for Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange, which is a mouthful, so just hold on to the letters. It's a record of insurance claims going back 7 years. And here's the part that matters. It follows the house, not the owner, the house. Sit with what that means. Somebody you've never met owned this place 4 years ago. A pipe burst and they filed a claim. Then a storm came through and they filed another one. They sold, they moved on, and their claim history stayed behind in those walls like a stain you can't see. You buy it. You call for a policy. The carrier runs the address, finds 2 water claims, and either prices you like a risk or turns you down flat. You didn't file anything. You inherited it. I've watched buyers learn this after closing, and there's no fixing it at that point. You own a house that's expensive to insure, and the day you go to sell, your buyer walks into the very same wall you did. And it isn't only about how many claims are sitting there. It's what they were for. 2 roof claims read very differently to a carrier than 1 kitchen fire from a decade ago. Water's the one that worries them, because water tends to come back to the same house twice. The good news is it's checkable, and asking costs nothing. The current owner can pull their own report on the property because they're entitled to it. A buyer usually can't pull it on somebody else's house, and that's exactly why you ask for it as part of the deal. So write it into your offer, the same way you ask for disclosures and an inspection. Ask the seller to provide the CLUE report on the property. If a seller refuses, that's an answer too. Listen to it. Number 4 is for anyone looking at a condo, and it's the fastest way I know to lose money on a place that's in perfect condition. Your unit can be flawless. New floors, new kitchen, not a thing wrong with it. And it can still be impossible to finance, because a lender isn't only approving you, they're approving the building. After the Surfside collapse, the standards on condo projects tightened considerably. If a building carries serious deferred maintenance, or reserves nowhere near where they should be, or an insurance policy that doesn't properly cover the structure, lenders can stop funding units there. Not your unit specifically, every unit in the project. Sit with that for a second. The day it happens, every buyer who needed a mortgage is gone. What's left is cash. And cash buyers circling a building with a known problem aren't generous people. Then the appraisal problem starts, because the next appraisal gets built on the sales that just happened, and those were the distressed ones. The paper value drops to meet the real one. I've watched this move through an entire building in under a year. Nothing changed about the units. Nobody's kitchen got worse. The financing walked out, and that was enough to do it. The signals are all in writing, and the seller already has them. A reserve study saying the reserves are underfunded. Minutes where the board's arguing about a roof, or a seawall, or an elevator nobody wants to pay for. A special assessment that's been discussed but never voted through. So before you make an offer on any condo, do 2 things. Ask your lender to check whether the project itself is eligible for financing, not just whether you are. Then ask for the reserve study and the last 2 years of meeting minutes. Read the boring documents. That's where the money's hiding. Number 5 comes down to a single date. June 15th, 1976. That's the day the Federal Building Code for Manufactured Housing took effect. Everything built after it was made to one national standard. Everything built before it wasn't. The lending world drew a hard line right there, and it hasn't moved since. A manufactured home built before that date generally doesn't qualify for the standard loan programs, and that has nothing to do with what shape it's in. A pre-code home can be beautifully kept, lovingly maintained, spotless, and it still sits on the wrong side of the line. So your buyer's looking at a personal property loan at a much higher rate, or they're paying cash. That's your entire market. And a tiny market means a low price no matter how good the place looks inside. I've watched people buy one of these convinced they'd found a bargain, then work out later that the bargain was the price, and the reason for the price was the financing. Here's the good news. That date is physically on the home. There's a small metal plate, usually inside a kitchen cabinet, in a bedroom closet, or near the electrical panel, and it'll list the manufacturer and the date it was built. There's a red certification label too on the outside of each section. So find the plate before you talk about price. If there's no plate anywhere, treat it as pre-code until somebody proves otherwise, and price it that way. One date decides whether that home's an asset or an anchor. Go read it. So let's put the 5 together. 1. The electrical panel, because Federal, Pacific, and Zinsco can cost you the insurance policy and the loan sitting behind it. 2. The plumbing, because gray polybutylene gets excluded, declined, or repiped on your dollar. 3. The CLUE report, because somebody else's claims are already attached to the house you're about to buy. 4. The condo project, because your lender approves the building and not just you. And 5. That 1976 date, because it decides whether a manufactured home can be financed at all. Now notice what all 5 have in common. Not one of them turns up in a listing photo. Not one of them is about how the house looks. Every single one's about whether the next person can get a loan and a policy, and that's what actually sets what your home is worth on the day you need to sell it. And that's the whole trick, really. It's why these stay hidden right up until they cost somebody money. A seller doesn't have to lie to you about any of it. They just have to not bring it up. And honestly, most of them don't know either. Nobody handed them a list. A house nobody can finance isn't a cheap house. It's a house with no buyers. You can check all 5 of these yourself in an afternoon before you sign a thing. So go check them.